Good afternoon. Welcome to math. Today you're going to need your math journal. You also are going to need probably some scrap paper to do some practice problems. So if you have any extra blank paper or extra line paper, get that out now. So go ahead and pause the video and get yourself some paper and your math journal. It should say Math Journal Volume 2. That's how you know you have the right one. Don't use Volume 1 because it won't have the right pages. So go find Math Journal Volume 2 and some scrap paper. Go ahead and pause. Okay, now that you have your book, go ahead and open your book all the way to the very last page, the part that's the cover on the very back, and you can see a number chart. On this number chart, it shows up to 110. And before school ended unexpectedly, we were learning how to round down and how to round up. Today we're going to review rounding down and rounding up and when to do that. So as you can see on my number chart, I drew a line in between the 4s column and the 5s column. Take a moment right now and draw a line in between 4 and 5 going all the way down your page. Ignore this top line right here that it has 0 to -9 because we're not talking about negative numbers yet. So just look at right here where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and draw the line going all the way up from the top all the way down to the bottom in between number 4 and 5. Now, once you've done that, that line is going to help you remember when to round down and when to round up. So let's do a couple of practice numbers together so you can remember what rounding is. Okay, so as a reminder, when we're rounding, we are trying to round to the nearest 10 as second graders. So right now, here's a poem to help us remember. 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. So if we look at our number chart, you can see if the number is in the 5 column or higher, we're going to let it soar. And if it's in the 4 column or lower, we're going to let it rest back over here with a 0 in the 1s column. Also, we have a 0 in the 1s column when we let it soar. So, for example, if I pick the number 67, think about, is that number in the 1s place higher than 5 or 4 or lower than 4? So, looking at 67, I can see that it's on the right side of the line, so I'm going to let it soar up to 70. So 67 rounds to the number 70. If I have, for example, the number 53, 53 when I look in the 1s column is lower than 4. So I'm going to let it rest, and I'm going to round 53 down to 50. If we look at our game, Hit the Target, we have some examples of numbers that we're going to round. So our first number that we're revealing is 31. Would I round 31 up or down? Think about that question for a minute. Do I round it up or down? Well, if I look in the 1s column, I can see that there is a 1. So I'm not going to round up. I'm going to round down to 30 and let it rest. So you can see the answer over here. Next, our next number is 42. Look at the 1s column. Is that number higher or lower than 4? Well, 42. 2 is lower than 4. So I know that 42 is going to rest back at 40 if I'm rounding to the nearest 10. Let's see if that's right. There you go. Next number is 19. If I look in the 1s column, I see the number 9. Well, if I look at my number chart, the number 9 is way over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to let that rise. So if I find 19, I bet the answer is going to be 20. Let's look at our response. Yes, it's 20. So here's the numbers that we're rounding up and rounding down, and then we could also round up. Notice when I rounded up, the tens place changed to a 2 because I went up to the nearest 10. Let's practice a couple more of those problems together. This time, I'm going to show the numbers, and on your scrap paper, I want you to figure out whether we should round down or up. So here's the first one, 57, 74, and 65. On your scrap paper, round those numbers to the nearest 10. Pay attention to the ones place so you can decide whether you need to round up or down. If you haven't finished, pause the video and finish your work before we continue. Okay, I hope you've had enough time to finish your problems. If you haven't, pause now because I'm about to show the answers. So looking at the number 57, and I look in the ones place, there is a 7 in the ones place. Well, 7 is higher than 5, so I know that I need to let it soar. And if I reveal our response, the answer is 60 because the nearest 10 to 57 is 60. The next number, 74, when I look in the ones place, there is a 4 in the ones place. Well, if a number is a 4 or lower in the ones place, I know I need to let it go down and rest. So when I reveal my response, I see that the closest 10 to 74 is 70. The last number is 65. Now, this one's a little bit tricky because it's a 5. So it's right in the middle of our number chart. But if it's 5 or higher, we let it soar up to the next number or let it rise. And they say 60 or 70, but actually it's 70. So the correct answer for this one is 70. I don't know why the book says 60, but when we round 65, we should get the answer 70. So next, we're going to talk about how rounding can help us solve adding and subtracting problems by using it to estimate. Estimate means that we are getting close to the right answer, but not the exact right answer. And it's just to help us figure out about how much of something we have or about how much of something we need. So we're going to use rounding in just a moment to estimate and solve addition and subtraction problems with estimation. So now we're going to use estimation to help us solve a problem about fruit at the grocery store. So I went to the grocery store and there wasn't very much fruit left for the whole town because people were buying a whole lot. So here's what I counted when I was at the grocery store. About how many pieces of fruit are left. That's what we're trying to figure out. Not exactly how many, but approximately or a little bit of how many, or making an estimate of how many. So when I went to the store, they had a sign and they said they had 48 apples left. They had 13 oranges and 25 bananas. So how can we figure out how many pieces of fruit there are without doing a lot of counting and adding up slowly? The first step that we're going to do is we're going to look at the ones column. Give me a second and I'm going to circle the numbers in the ones column. So in this number 48, the 8 is in the ones column. In the oranges, there's a 3 in the ones place. And here, there's a 5 in the ones place. So if I have the number 48, I'm going to round it up because I see that 8 is higher than 5, or 5 or higher. So that means 48 is going to become 50. If I look at my oranges, there are only 13 and a 3 in the ones place. Well, a 3 is lower than 4, so I'm going to let it go down to the bottom and rest, which means 13 is going to round down to 10. So oranges, I rounded down. Apples, I rounded up. Next, I look at my bananas, and there are 25 bananas. So if I have a 5, that's higher than 4, so I'm going to let it soar. And if I have 25 bananas, that actually becomes 30 bananas. So 25 rounds up to 30. That's the nearest 10 to 25. So when I am adding these up, now all I have to do is add 50, 10, and 30. Well, there's all zeros in the ones place, so I can just put a 0 there. And there's 5 plus 1 is 6, plus 3 is 9. So there are approximately 90 pieces of fruit at the store. This is our estimate is 90. There aren't exactly 90. There's about 90 pieces of fruit at the store. Next, we're going to use rounding to help us solve a subtraction problem. So here's our subtraction story problem. There were 74 cookies at the store. Someone went and bought 59 cookies. About how many cookies are left? Oops, I forgot a question mark. About how many cookies are left? So first, I want to write down my numbers out of my story problem. And my two numbers are 74 and 59. Well, if I look at the number 74 and I look in the ones place, 74 is going to round up or down. If you guess down, you're right. 74 is going to round down because there's a 4 in the ones place. 74 is going to round down to the nearest 10, which is 70. 59 has a 9 in the ones place, so that is going to round up to the nearest 10, which makes it 60. Now I'm subtracting, so I want to go down. 70 minus 60 is, let's think about it. So 0 minus 0 is 0. 7 minus 6 is 1. So our answer is 10. We've estimated that there are about 10 cookies left. Not exactly 10 cookies left, but about 10. So that is how we use subtraction that is how we use rounding to help us subtract. It doesn't help us find out exactly how much. It only helps us to find out an estimate of how much. Okay, let's practice one more problem with rounding. In this problem, it says, at the class barbecue, families brought 22 hamburgers, 17 hot dogs, and 35 cheese sandwiches. About how many meals did they make? So you can see here, we're looking for not the exact number, but we see this word about. When you see the word about in a math problem, that means that you're not trying to find exactly how much, you're trying to estimate. And the way that we estimate is that we round our numbers up or down to the nearest 10. And we first need to look for our numbers. So in our math problem, we have 22 hamburgers. We have 17 hot dogs and 35 cheese sandwiches. So looking at our first number, 22, if I round to the nearest 10, I first look at the 2, and I see that the 2 is lower than 5. So if it's 4 or lower, I'm going to let it rest. So 4 or less, let it rest. So 22 is going to round down to the number 20. Then I look at the number 17, and the 7 is in the ones place. If it's 5 or more, let it soar, and 7 is more than 5. So I'm going to let it soar also up to 20. Next, I look at the number 35, and 35, if it's 5 or more, let it soar. So 35, I'm going to round to 40. So now I have all of my numbers ready to go, and all I need to do is count and add them up. So starting with 40, because that's my biggest number, and it's easier to start with 40. 40 plus 20 plus 20. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. 4 plus 2 plus 2. I'm going to add those up. 4 plus 2 is 6. Plus 2 more is 8. So our number is 80. So if I write my answer is going to be they made about 80 meals for the barbecue. Let's read that sentence together again. Ready? They made about 80 meals for the barbecue. That is how I'm going to write my response. Next, I have a challenge question for you. Using your answer from over here, we're going to answer the challenge question. The challenge question is, all right, gotta lower that. There we go. Did they bring enough to feed 65 children? And our next part of that question is, how do you know? So first, how many did they bring? Well, they made about 80 sandwiches. So did they bring enough to feed 65 children? Yes, we know that 80 is definitely more than 65. So our answer there is yes. However, the next part, you have to answer, how do you know? Well, looking at our response, let's read this together. I know because there are about 80 meals, and that is that less or more than 65? What do you guys think? Less or more? Well, it is 80 is more than 65. So if I read my sentence, I can say it again. Read with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I know because there are about 80 meals, and that is more than 65. This is a really important skill, that you are able to justify your answers and you're able to explain how you know something. Next year in 3rd grade, when you take the SBAC, you're going to have to write a sentence like this every time you solve a problem to explain how you know. So let's make sure we practice it together one more time. I know because, that's a great sentence starter. There are about 80 meals, and that is more than 65. Great practice. I hope you read that aloud with me. Okay, so next you're going to open up your Student Math Journal, Volume 2. Remember, it says Volume 2 on the top corner. You're going to open that up, and we're going to do some practice with estimation on page 158. Again, page 158. If you're not ready, pause the video before you continue. Okay, so here is my book. It's open to page 158. As you can see on the top, it has an example problem. And it has 1, 2, 3 practice problems. What's really important when you're looking at this is that you first need to round before you add. Some people might have done these problems already on accident before we learned this skill. So make sure that if you did do that beforehand, that you go back and fix it. As you can see here, they have the number 59 plus, I'll highlight it here, 59 plus 26 equals question mark. Well, we are not trying to add exactly 59 plus 26. We are trying to come up with a ballpark estimate. And so we're going to round the number 59 up to the number 60 and the number 26 up to the number 30. And then we're going to add 60 plus 30 and we get our answer 90. Now, if you solve them exactly, you don't get that exact number. You're thinking 50 plus 20 is 70. And then you can think 6 plus 9 equals 85. So this is our ballpark estimate here. And then this shows how you can add the tens first and get 70. And then you can add the ones next to get 15. And then you can get your total 85. This is another way of doing regrouping, is what they show down here. So you're going to practice 2 skills on this page. 1, you're going to practice finding ballpark estimates. And then 2, you're going to practice regrouping with addition. So for number 1, let's go ahead and do that one together. It's going to take a second to load. 1 minute. Dismiss. So right here, number 1, we have 34 and 71 is our 2 responses. So first, we're going to come up with a estimate, and we're going to, let me make this bigger. There we go. So we're going to add 34 plus 71, but not exactly. We're going to round them first. So 34, there is a 4 in the ones place, which means it's 4 or less. Let it rest. So 34 is going to round to the number 30. Oops. There we go. It's going to round to the number 30 plus 71. There is a 1 in the ones place. So 30 is going to round, 34 is rounding to 30, and 71 I'm going to round it down because 1 is less than 4 to 70. And my answer is 30 plus 70. Well, I'm taking 70 and I'm adding 3 10s. So if I was using counting up, I could say 70, 80, 90, 100. That's 3 10s. My answer is 100. You can also think about my adding numbers that combine to make 10, and 7 and 3 combine to make 10 always. So that can turn into 100. Next, I want to add with regrouping. So first, when we practice this way of regrouping, I can think 30 plus 70 equals 100. And 4 plus 1 equals 5. But I need to make sure I put it in the correct spot. So I'm going to scooch over a bit, make sure I have it in the ones place. And then 100 plus 5 is 105. I don't know why that got smaller all of a sudden. Make it all 24. Now it's too big. So we get our answer 105. So that is how we solve number 1. I'm not going to do any more examples with you today. I want you to go ahead and work on solving the rest of the problems, number 2 and number 3, on your own. And then number 4, it asks you to solve one of the problems a different way. You could use any of the other strategies we've learned. You could use adding on a number line, anything that we've learned in the past, and you could solve it that way. You could use counting up to solve it, whatever makes sense to you. And then you write your response there. Next, you can go and work on math boxes on page 168. So we started on 158. We're going to skip a bunch of pages because we actually already did them. And you're going to go to 168 and work on math boxes there. There is another estimate problem down here. You can see number 2, or up here. Number 2 is an estimation problem. Again, first they want you to solve it, and then they want you to find a ballpark estimate, just like we did with number 1 on the other page. Finally, you also have work in your home links book. So your home links book is where your homework is. It's a different book entirely. It says home links on the front of it. It's got a bunch of pages already torn out from math homework you took home already this year. You're going to do, with this lesson, page 188. So it's 158, 168 in the other book, the math journal book, and then 188. You can tell it's the right lesson because on the top it says home link 7-1, and that's the same lesson that we did today, is math 7-1.